The morning was unremarkable. Gray sky, light wind, the kind of chill that settles beneath a coat. She moved through the city without drawing attention, her pace even, her gaze low. She passed storefronts glowing with early light, watched delivery trucks unload crates of products with barcodes and brand names far removed from the lives of the people who handled them. She reached the district just after 10 a.m. Uptown, Boutique Row, the curated luxury corner of the city. Everything here gleamed. Marble sidewalks, manicured planters, shops named after people no one had ever met, fonts expensive and vague. It was a place that rewarded appearances, that scanned you before you even touched the handle on the door. She stepped inside anyway. Her shoes weren't scuffed, but they weren't new. Her coat was clean, but not current. No purse, no jewelry, no shopping bags from neighboring stores to signal that she was part of the day's performance. To them, she was out of place, but she was exactly where she needed to be, because her job wasn't to fit in. It was to observe. And beneath that plain exterior was a trained eye, a hidden checklist, a digital recorder disguised as a phone, and a contract from corporate that would make her notes matter more than any card in a customer's wallet. The store was quiet, too quiet, music low, staff stationed like statues, alert but disinterested. She paused by a display of folded sweaters, wool blend, imported, ridiculously priced. She reached out to inspect the stitching. That was when it began. A rustle, a voice, first a sigh. Then the manager, thin, tall, practiced politeness masking mild contempt, approached with precision. "You'll need to leave." She looked up slowly. "Excuse me?" But the answer came before the question finished. "This store isn't for browsing." That was the phrase. She logged it, word for word. A phrase flagged directly by corporate during training as a breach of customer approach standards. She looked around. Customers watched. No one intervened. The message was clear. She didn't belong. She nodded once, turned, and walked out without another word. Outside, she kept walking for 2 blocks, then stopped beneath the overhang of a parking garage, took out her phone, opened a secure app, and began her report. Not just on the store's greeting policy, but on the tone, the body language, the layout that funneled attention only to high-value shoppers, the security camera angle that failed to record the moment she was turned away, the manager's name badge, the exact time of her entry and exit. All of it, every second accounted for, because she wasn't there to shop. She was there to see, and she had seen everything she needed. She didn't return home right away. Instead, she moved on to the next location in her itinerary. 3 more stores on the same block, all subsidiaries of the same luxury brand. The assignment had been issued just 48 hours earlier. Anonymous assessments of customer service consistency across their metropolitan branches, with emphasis on implicit bias, cleanliness, and escalation protocols. She had accepted without hesitation, not just because she was good at it, but because it mattered. She knew what it meant to be judged before you spoke, to be dismissed not for what you said, but for what you didn't wear. She'd felt that sting too many times, long before she became the one quietly evaluating the people who used to treat her like background noise. Now she was paid to watch, and what she saw, she documented with brutal precision. The second store greeted her with silence. 3 associates behind the counter, one texting, one rearranging stock, one staring through her like she was furniture. She gave them time. 10 minutes passed. Still nothing. Another flag for the report. At the 3rd location, she received a forced smile, clipped words, and an offer to come back with your husband next time. That phrase, casual, condescending, joined her growing list of violations. It was an old game, and they didn't realize how badly they were losing it. By 4 p.m., her reports were uploaded, time-stamped, GPS verified, cross-checked with internal policy documents, each store rated, each interaction categorized. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't need to. The truth was sharp enough. At corporate, a senior compliance officer reviewed her submissions before leaving for the day. His eyes narrowed as he scanned her notes. The first store score was dangerously low, lower than any had received in the last 2 years. He cross-referenced employee schedules, matched manager initials, read the transcript of what was said word for word. He didn't pick up the phone. He emailed the regional director with the subject line, "Immediate concern, discriminatory behavior flagged by mystery audit." Meanwhile, she sat at a diner 3 blocks away, warm coffee in hand. No one looked twice at her now. To them, she was still invisible. And that was fine, because her visibility wasn't needed in the room. Only her impact, and in the next 48 hours it would be felt. At closing time, the store that told her to leave turned off its lights. The manager walked to the back office, filed reports, and laughed about the girl in the old coat. He had no idea his name was already circulating through the upper ranks of the company. He thought he understood. No idea that his days of managing anyone were numbered. And no idea that the woman he dismissed had already rewritten his future. The next morning began like any other. The boutique opened its doors at 10 a.m. sharp. The music was soft jazz. The scent, amber and cedarwood, was piped from hidden vents to create the illusion of warmth. Staff arrived without urgency, coffee in hand, air of control. The manager straightened his tie in the reflection of the glass display case, unaware that 2 emails bearing his name had already reached desks far above him. In another part of the city, inside a concrete high-rise lit by pale morning sun, corporate had mobilized. The regional director had summoned HR. Legal had been CC'd. Compliance was building a dossier. And at the center of it all was her report. Line by line, timestamp by timestamp, it painted a picture that couldn't be softened or explained away. Not by misunderstanding. Not by training gaps. What happened in that store was bias. Clear. Measurable. In direct violation of company values written into policy but never enforced on the floor. Until now, while they deliberated, she remained silent. She wasn't waiting for recognition. That wasn't her purpose. She worked the same as always, quietly. That afternoon, she completed another assignment across town. Another mystery visit. Another test of standards behind polished smiles and curated customer experiences. She didn't rush it, didn't break her process, because integrity to her meant consistency even when no one was watching. Especially then. By the end of the day, corporate had reached a decision. It would start with a call, formal, recorded. Then a visit, unannounced. The audit team would walk through the boutique posing as customers. Not to catch anyone off guard. To confirm. She wouldn't be there. She didn't need to be. She had already done her part. And if the results matched her report, which they always did, corrective action would follow. It wouldn't be cosmetic. It would be decisive. At the boutique, the manager received a calendar notification. Mandatory regional meeting in 2 days. Unusual. The kind of meeting that usually spelled change. He shrugged it off, brushed a speck of dust from a glass counter, told a team member to restock the back shelf. The same team member who had looked past her, who hadn't spoken, who hadn't smiled. They didn't know it yet, but their silence had cost them something they didn't even know they were being measured for. Across the city, she folded up her jacket, poured herself a glass of water, and marked her task complete. She didn't feel victorious. She felt responsible. Because when power is given invisibly, it must be wielded with care. And she carried it not like a weapon, but like a mirror. One that forced companies to see themselves as they really were. Not how they wanted to be seen. The audit team arrived quietly. 2 women, 1 man. Business casual. Calm, observant. They entered the boutique mid-morning, blending in with the natural rhythm of the day. They didn't introduce themselves. Didn't flash authority. They just browsed. But they weren't looking at clothes. They were looking at behavior. How long it took to be greeted. Which customers received eye contact. Whether tone shifted based on appearance. Everything she had documented, they saw again firsthand. One associate ignored the woman with the afro-textured hair and thrifted coat. Another watched a customer fumble through clearance items and offered nothing but silence. The manager lingered by a mirror adjusting his cufflinks while a customer stood at the counter for nearly 2 minutes before being acknowledged. It wasn't one event. It was a pattern. Consistent. Indefensible. Back at corporate, the findings were verified. 3 locations. For failed scores. 2 policy breaches. 1 direct complaint from a customer later revealed to be a retired district manager. It was no longer about one bad moment. It was about culture. Or the lack of one. The mystery shopper received a message. Brief. Professional. Your report has been escalated to final action. Thank you for your continued excellence. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The outcome wasn't about her. It was about the system adjusting to the truth. By the end of the week, changes began. The regional meeting happened. It was not a seminar. It was a reckoning. Store managers were put on notice. Those with violations were suspended pending further review. And at the original boutique, a sign appeared one morning. Closed for internal restructuring. Customers turned away confused. Staff more so. Inside, HR sat across from the manager, now stripped of posture. No suit could shield him from accountability. His explanation was long, but his dismissal was brief. The company had no room for standards in theory, only for standards in practice. Elsewhere, she moved on to her next assignment. Another district, another set of stores. The cycle repeated, but so did her presence. Still invisible, still exacting, still patient, because power that watches without warning is the kind that keeps systems honest. She walked past the boutique later that month. It had reopened. New staff, new signage, same shell but different intent. She paused for a second, not to admire it, to remember that no matter how polished the outside looked, what happened on the inside was what mattered most. She returned to the city 2 months later. A new assignment, same employer. This time, a high-profile rollout, 5 stores, all recently renovated, hailed in press releases as the brand's next evolution. The company had learned something from the fallout. Or at least, it claimed to. They changed the uniforms, rewrote the customer service handbook, sent out internal emails emphasizing empathy, approachability, and brand inclusivity. But she knew what to look for. Surface polish meant nothing if the core hadn't shifted. She didn't approach her task like someone hunting mistakes. She walked in like a customer. Which was the point. Because how people treated you when they didn't know who you were, that was the real audit. Store 1 passed. Not perfectly, but sincerely. The associate greeted her immediately. Offered help. Didn't hover or condescend. Asked a few kind questions. Didn't flinch when she declined to buy. She left with no violations logged, only a quiet note, this team is trying. Store 2 failed within 30 seconds. No eye contact. No greeting. An associate whispered something to a colleague and both laughed when she walked toward the accessories rack. She flagged it. Not vindicatively. Clinically. Accurately. At Store 3, she was approached by a manager. Not because she stood out, but because this one had learned. The manager didn't ask if she needed help, she asked how her day was going. It was subtle. But that mattered. The warmth wasn't scripted. It was real. That store passed with distinction. She included it in the final report not just for its service, but for its recovery. That store had once been like the boutique that told her to leave. Now it was a model. Proof that accountability could seed growth. Meanwhile, word had spread. Across the retail network, rumors of her returned. No name. No photo. Just stories. A woman who dressed plainly. Who sometimes asked simple questions and sometimes didn't speak at all. Who could turn a compliment into a compliance form. Who had the power to change careers but never raised her voice. Staff began adjusting out of caution. Some out of fear. But the smart ones? They adjusted out of integrity. Back at headquarters, a new policy was being drafted. Not by senior execs alone, but in collaboration with feedback gathered directly from mystery shopper data. They called it Ground Truth Protocol. She didn't ask to be named. She wouldn't have accepted if they'd offered. But the architects of the change knew. Without her, none of it would exist. One night, she received a message from an associate at the boutique where it all began. The store had been reopened under new leadership. The former manager? Gone. The associate? Promoted. And the message? A single line. I didn't realize I was being watched. I'm glad I was. She closed the phone and sipped her tea. She never sought justice through spectacle. She delivered it like light through a window, quiet, sharp, illuminating everything in its path. And there were more stores waiting. More rooms that needed seeing. The company's internal transformation was subtle to outsiders but seismic to those within. What once had been a culture of superficial perfection now evolved into one of conscious presence. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But the shift was real. Measurable. And it traced back to a single catalyst, an anonymous report written by someone no one remembered serving. Except now they remembered. They trained differently. Not because it was trendy, but because the consequences of not evolving had become tangible. And she? She had become legend. Her name wasn't in documents. Her face wasn't known. But her presence loomed in every corner of the network. New hires were told stories, treat every guest like the one from downtown. Veterans straightened their posture when unfamiliar customers walked in alone. Because mystery now meant potential. And potential meant exposure. She never slowed down. Assignments shifted from stores to regional operations. Soon, it wasn't just greeting violations, it was hiring policies, promotion gaps, blind spots in language used in internal communication. She didn't ask for power, but they gave it to her anyway because no one else saw the fractures like she did. Her silence became its own authority. She never raised her voice. She never needed to, because the data always spoke for her. One day, she walked back into the boutique where it all began. Not to shop, to see. New staff, new manager. She wasn't recognized, but she was greeted. Warmly, sincerely. They offered her tea, treated her like someone they were glad had walked in. She said little, browsed slowly, smiled once, then left. No report filed, just one quiet mental note. They remembered. Later that evening, she submitted her final audit for the year. It wasn't the most dramatic, but it was the most complete. The company had changed not because it wanted to, but because it had been held to account by someone they didn't see coming. And now, they had built systems to never need her again. That to her was success. To make herself obsolete. To fix the room so it could hold itself accountable. She packed her things. Not in a rush. Not in sadness. Her contract was complete. But the work? It always continued somewhere else. Another door. Another unassuming entrance. Another space where someone needed to be reminded. Just because you think someone doesn't belong, doesn't mean they're the one who's out of place.